Welcome, everyone, to Science from the Fringe. My name is Bryce Nichols. I am a professor of genetics at Rutgers University and co-founder of Biosafety Now. And I am joined today for an exciting episode of Can I Respond to That, Please? By a scientist, a gentleman, and one of, if not the smartest people I know on the planet, Kevin Bass. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate that introduction, Bryce. That was
Well, you should. You should. It's very, very rare that I have been able to bequeath that honor of the smartest, one of, if not the smartest people that I know. So appreciate it.
I definitely put Peter and above me as the smartest people in the world, but I'll be happy taking a fourth place there.
Well, look, in my book, you're above them, but I appreciate you're also one of the more humble people I've ever interacted with. Typically, Jay's on here, and we all know Jay's ego is off the chart and can't stop talking about it. Speaking of Jay, of course, we are here today because we are going to respond to an article about Jay. And I guess the article in question, so if perhaps people watching this, I'm sure, don't know that Jay Bhattacharya was recently nominated to be the new director of the National Institutes of Health. That happened last Wednesday. Actually, when was that? It wasn't that long ago. A few days ago, right?
A few days ago.
It only was a few days ago. It seems like forever ago because the internet exploded. You know why? Because they rolled out it was every day there was a story like Jay Bhattacharya might be the NIH director. And then the next day, Jay Bhattacharya really might be the NIH. So they kept milking this because they got so much publicity because everyone everyone's a big fan of Jay. But then finally got named potentially to be the nominee for the NIH director. And in addition to having a lot of outpouring of love and support on X and the predicted a lot of gnashing of teeth over on Blue Sky, which is also called Blue Cry by people who have actually, read some of the posts over there. There were a few articles about Jay that, I found to be a bit unfair, and I know you did too, Kevin. So do you want to, say which article we're going to be talking about today?
I guess the title is Trump's pick to lead the NIH gets some things right.
Get some things right. And the article is, so I'm going to pull it up here. This is written by, and who is this written by?
I don't know how to pronounce her name. I actually learned to pronounce her name as we were talking just before this. But it's Zeynep Tufekci, I believe it is. And she's I guess she was trained in sociology, and she's at Princeton, a Princeton professor who writes one New York Times article every single day, apparently. It appears.
Kevin, do you think if she is writing those articles once a day, is it possible she's using ChatGPT like I would if I were writing an article a day? Is it possible?
This thought popped into my mind. She's definitely a tech person, so she's done sociology of tech a lot. There's a possibility but
we would not make accusations. And frankly, I think it'd be smart because that would be a smart way to free up time to do other things.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And then you'd write for the New York Times, or she is actually a large language model. That's the alternative. She actually is one herself.
And I bet if we did a ChatGPT prompt that said write an article in the style of her, you would get an article in the style of her.
Interesting. Maybe. But,
yeah. But hopefully it would not have the untruths or the non-truths or the distortions that we're going to talk about in this one. But before we begin, Kevin, I did say to you in our little pre whatever we did, the little huddle in the green room, if there is such a thing on these things. I said I have I'm a bit conflicted today because I do appreciate that Zeynep was one of the few journalists to defend myself and Richard back in March when Richard Ebright, I should say, when we had a couple of hit pieces written about us because of our outspoken commentary on the lab origin. And so It is with a heavy heart. It is with a heavy heart that today we are going to dive in to this, whatever it is, this opinion, which I find to be unfortunate. And that's putting it light. Unfortunately, Zainab, I respect your work, but this is not one of your finer moments. Apologies. I really, and both you and I, Kevin, we're big fans of Jay. He's a good guy, just generally a good guy. And we're both big supporters of him as for the NIH director position. So we get a little bit pissed off when people are lazy about describing things he said before, especially as it relates to, deaths and mass death and accusations of this or that. So should we just dive in to this article and see what exactly we're going to respond to? So
let me make one comment. I think Zainab comes across to me whenever I read her tweets, and this is what's frustrating about this article. She comes across to me as somebody who's very passionate, and she comes across as somebody who's authentic and kind of has a similar orientation to truth as we do. She really thinks some things are true and some things are not, and so, and it's very important to set the record straight on that. Like, that's how she comes across. Like, I'm not saying that that's necessarily, but that's how she's comes across to me when I read her stuff, and especially her tweets. And this article is a real disappointment compared to what I feel is that kind of self-portrayal portrayal because it does get so much systematically wrong and in such a lazy way as you put it. So yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, so it begins. It's a welcome sign that unlike many of Donald Trump's picks to lead parts of the nation's health system, his pick for director of the National Institutes of Health, Jay Bhattacharya, is actually qualified. Now, that actually is an interesting choice there, but I won't dwell on it. Though his record during the COVID-19 pandemic includes making catastrophically wrong predictions. Okay, well, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to it and see if that's accurate. But I'm going to read that again just so that when for Jay's, so Jay doesn't miss this one when he watches it. Though his record during the COVID-19 pandemic includes making catastrophically wrong predictions, he was also correct, especially later, on the need to consider the societal costs of prolonging early pandemic measures, including closures, hospital rules limiting visits, extended mask and vaccine mandates, and social distancing rules. Okay. Anything you take issue with there, Kevin?
Well, you highlighting the actually is very funny. It's very kind of a passive-aggressive kind of thing. And then the catastrophically wrong errors. Well, that's another interesting word choice. She's very hyperbolic in her writing often, and this is no exception. She's not okay. He can't be the one who did any catastrophically wrong predictions because he wasn't the one making policy. So how could they have been catastrophically wrong? They could have been egregiously wrong, right? But he actually didn't, I don't think, so.
Yeah, well, like you said, he wasn't determining policy,
yes.
Right? Like, he was offering policy positions that weren't implemented.
Yes.
So to be fair, even if his policy positions were totally wrong in whatever way we're defining wrong, it's kind of impossible for them to be catastrophically wrong because they just sort of would not have caused catastrophe, right? I guess, or the implication, of course, is that, as you'll see in a moment, because we're talking about life and death things, by using the word catastrophically, it kind of is getting at this implication of that I see this tendency of people to lazily refer to Jay as like a mass murderer. And you've seen this.
So the last thing I would say that probably the most important thing about this paragraph is how it frames the article and sort of the attempt to sort of set the record straight according to a certain kind of narrative, which is that, Jay was right about the later things and he was an important voice. but he was just completely wrong about the early things. And this is how we're going to synthesize, the establishment paradigm with the criticism, which is that the establishment paradigm got most things right early on. There was this need for these extreme measures, but Jay was really correct in criticizing them and in helping for us to sort of get rid of these rules, extended massive vaccine mandates, etc. So, and digging even deeper, thinking even deeper on this, it's really saying that everything worked out well. We had the early lockdowns, we had the early mandates, we had the early stuff that happened that was all bad, and then we lifted it, and then Jay was right about the way we should lift it, and everything actually is good, and there's doesn't need to be accountability for anything because it turned out exactly as it should.
Perfect. Everyone is so happy, as we know. I actually forgot that everything worked out well. You're right. We should maybe just end this episode now. Because why are so many people upset then? I don't get it.
So there's this basic attempt in this narrative to say everything is okay. That this is the point of this first paragraph, and that's very important. Perhaps that makes sense. This is sort of the establishment line. Now we have Jay in the NIH, and that's okay because he was right about some things, but everything went well. And don't be upset about it anymore. Nobody should be upset about anything that happened. Yep.
It's also a case, we didn't really dwell on it. We should maybe just point out that the title of this article is the most lukewarm endorsement I've ever seen.
Right.
Trump's pick to lead the NIH gets some things right, which of course is better than saying get some things wrong. That's the thing. Like it's the most, it's right on that line of actually being an endorsement, but it's the worst possible endorsement you possibly can. Like it just is such a blah. What is it? Like, what's the right word here? It's like meh. Well, I don't even know.
I think this is a backhanded compliment. I think this is
a compliment. Whether it's, I mean, it's not it's a statement. It's like, it's a very begrudging. It's like a begrudging admittance that he's not a horrible mass murderer. I think that's the way I read this. But your backhanded compliment, perhaps.
Yeah, I think she's putting him down. I think she's putting him down with that title.
Actually qualified. That's amazing. That's kind of a rude.
Yeah,
it's just rude.
Yeah.
Beneath Zainab, but she knows it. She'll never come on the show, but I think she knows it. All right, here we go. Let's get into the meat of this op-ed. And here we go. Here's some of what Bhattacharya got wrong about COVID-19. One thing I will point out is that the word some also implies that there's more that she didn't list, right? So that's also useful to know. So perhaps there's an extended, like there's an addendum, or like some, additional materials we could look at, supplementary figures that will show additional songs of Jay. Okay, so here we go. This actually, now I want you to sort of take this apart with a knife here, or sorry, we're not going to use violent terms. I'll cut that out. I would like you to start meticulously using that razor sharp wit of yours and your intellect, as I said at the beginning. So here's the statement. In the early days of the pandemic, Bhattacharya repeatedly, okay, we're going to come back to that, predicted that the virus would likely kill about 20,000 to 40,000 Americans. Parentheses, the death toll turned out to be about 1.2 million. So, Kevin, thoughts on this? Where to begin? Where should you begin on this one?
We can start with repeatedly. He didn't do it repeatedly at all.
If he didn't do it at all, then he couldn't have done it repeatedly. So that's a problem, right? We have a logical issue here. Because
even the thing that she's alluding to and claiming that he did, even the mention of 20,000 deaths, that mention only occurred in one place. She's already misreading what that mention actually was about, but it only occurred in one place. So there's essentially, I don't know how else to say it, a lie here. She lied by using this word repeatedly, even if she was right about her specific claim, which she's not.
It's actually worse, right? Because I believe there are three links, right?
it's very interesting. These three references to establish this whole repeatedly thing. There's three links. The original Wall Street article of note, the one where he actually talks about this 20,000, this alleged 20,000 deaths prediction. The Stanford press release about the Wall Street Journal article, and a New York Times article misrepresenting that article, just like Zeynep was misrepresenting it. So actually, this repeatedly refers to one incident and two commentaries about that one incident, which is not repeatedly. But she had, I mean, I don't understand why. Well, okay, so this is confusing.
We don't have to understand it, Kevin.
This is confusing because she had to have known that all three articles were about the same incident. Yet she used the word repeatedly.
Because we know that she's talented, right? I mean, we talked about this. She's not, this seems, like I said, it seems kind of like beneath her to do this. And I really would like this one's bad. Let's just be honest. This is bad. This is really bad. So it's hard to, I don't want to like impeach motives or something. It's just sloppy, perhaps. Like, it's just wrong. It's just freaking wrong. Like, come on.
Or it could be ChatGPT. That would actually explain it.
That could
would be it.
That would actually that's you might have solved this, because maybe this was the ChatGPT thing. You know, she was using it to polish the article, the op-ed, and it just threw in this word repeatedly. And ChatGPT was like repeatedly, because it's so it could be the AI that did this. If so, I would like to apologize to Zeynep, and I'm sure you'd like to join me in apologizing to her for thinking it was her that mistakenly referred to one thing as repeatedly.
Yeah, absolutely, because then Zeynep would be completely blameless, and we could just blame the AI.
Could have been the AI. Now, that raises a question: should the AI have been credited for this op-ed?
Right.
If that's the case.
Exactly.
But again, we don't know. I mean, the New York Times, it's up to them how they want to handle. But here are the links that you wrote this amazing tweet thread about it, which we're going through here. So, okay, you say, wait, these three articles in which Dr. Bhattacharya repeatedly predicted that link are actually about just one article, and there's no repetition at all. It looks really bad that Zeynep is already spreading misinformation in the first sentence. It not only looks bad, it is bad. But here we go. Now we actually get to the heart of the matter. So what exactly did he say? Kevin, do you want to go through exactly what this statement that's been repeated again and again about him saying 20,000 or what? Let's go back. Let me see exactly what she says again. She says, so this is what we're debunking. In the early days of the pandemic, Bhattacharya repeatedly predicted that the virus would likely kill about 20 to 40,000 Americans. So we've already pointed out repeatedly as BS, but now you want to take apart what he actually said and whether what that statement is true or not?
Okay, so the keywords here are repeatedly, which we've already done with. Predicted is the other keyword. And likely. To understand what Jay was saying, we have to take his statement in context, but we'll go through his statement first and then we'll put it into context.
Just to be clear here, you're reading from the Wall Street Journal article.
Yes, this is his exact words in this one couple of paragraphs that kind of convey his meaning. And Jay is a very skilled writer. And so he says, but it can make a difference between an epidemic that kills 20,000 and kills 2 million. First thing to note, I would say, is 20,000 to 2 million. There's a reason those each begin with 2, right? It's because there's this alliteration here, right? He's saying it could be like there's virus that could kill like very few or like a ton. And what he's doing is he's establishing with this is sort of a range of uncertainty of what the virus could do. Rather than necessarily making a prediction. He's not making a prediction that's 20,000. You could also say, by the way, you could also say with the sentence that he predicted 2 million, right? Well,
you wouldn't say that because that's consistent with what happened, right? So we would never say that if we were trying to write a hit piece.
Exactly. But there's nothing in this sentence that leads one to believe that it's 20,000 or 2 million. That's not the function of the sentence to make a prediction. That's the core point. The function is there's a broader purpose of this sentence with the context of this paragraph, and you have to read the paragraphs in order to determine what that.
Can you just go ahead and read it in context?
Fear of COVID-19 is based on its high estimated case fatality rate. 2 to 4% of people with confirmed COVID-19 have died, according to the World Health Organization and others. So if 100 million people ultimately get the disease, 2 to 4 million, 100 million Americans ultimately get the disease, 2 to 4 million could die. We believe that estimate is deeply flawed. The true fatality rate is the portion of those infected who die, not the deaths from identified positive cases. The latter rate is misleading because of selection bias in testing. The degree of bias is uncertain because available data are limited, but it could make the difference between an epidemic that kills 20,000 and one that kills 2 million. If the number of actual infections is much larger than the number of cases, orders of magnitude larger, then the true fatality rate is much lower as well. That's not only plausible, but likely based on what we know so far. He's framing a lower end estimate to provide contrast with the higher estimate, right? That's why he both start with 2 for rhetorical reasons. He's issuing a conceptual hypothetical in a provocative frame. The 20,000 is kind of supposed to be provocative. That's the point of the 20,000. It's supposed to be provocative to really hammer home the uncertainty. In some ways not even he himself, if I can imagine where his head is at, he himself is not saying that, but he's saying this because he's like, wow, we really don't know. And so in this, he uses this provocative frame to convey the profound policy implications of the scientific uncertainty around the mortality rate of the disease. So he's not estimating the rate at 20,000. Anybody who reads this sentence can see that it's a hypothetical, conceptual, written in a provocative way that's supposed to really engage people in the sort of radical uncertainty of what we know. If anything, it's sort of Socratic. It's provocative. You're supposed to think about it. He's pushing you to think. He's not saying it's 20,000. Like, he's not saying that. He's probing us and forcing us to, in a provocative way, reconsider what we think we know, which is what a scientist should do, in my opinion. Especially when the stakes are this high in this pandemic, which is something that's very important when we get to the end of her essay here in the New York Times, where she actually makes the same point. The stakes are so high, but the stakes are high in both directions. If there's tons of people who are going to die, and we think there's tons of people who are going to die, we're going to do more things, potentially, more lockdowns, more measures, because we want to prevent that from happening. But the stakes are also high in the opposite direction. If very few people are going to die, but we think tons of people are going to die, we might do those same really strict things, and the result could be very terrible for Americans, because those things weren't justified, and those things have negative consequences. And so that's something that she doesn't really account for here. But Jay is really emphasizing the radical uncertainty and the radical consequences on both ends of the prediction estimates. And so that, I think it's just really important to understand at least that.
Did he make is the problem here that he says at the end, that's not plausible, but likely based on, so here's the problem, right?
Yes.
Like, this is likely. So this word likely, I think they're attaching on to say like he was more definitive, like than he actually was.
But they're saying that his alleged prediction, which we see is not a prediction, it's a hypothetical, and it's a provocative hypothetical, which is meant to make a point. It's not meant to provide a prediction. It's meant to make a point about the uncertainty of the pandemic. They're applying that likely to the lower end of the estimate, which is not at all. He wasn't making that prediction. He was giving a range for provocative reasons. It's not making that. But what's more is that likely doesn't even apply to that part of the paragraph. That likely applies to the prior sentence, which is this: if the number of infections is much greater than the number of cases, order of magnitude larger, then the true fatality rate is much lower as well. That likely is saying that the true fatality rate is much lower compared to the case fatality rate that is being bandied about at this time. Specifically, case fatality rate of 3.4%. He's saying it's likely lower. That's all that the function of that word likely is doing in this paragraph.
Right.
And he's right. He was completely 100% right. Yeah,
Listen,
go ahead.
being right doesn't matter. Because no matter if you're right or you're wrong, if you're Jay, you're catastrophically
He's
wrong.
catastrophically wrong, 100%.
I think your key point here is that anyone with basic reading comprehension shouldn't, and the fact that you have to explain like what, he's using like provocative, like you shouldn't have to explain it because he literally does not say it's been attributed to him. We shouldn't have to explain the way he's constructing paragraph.
Yeah, but
yes, go ahead. What's
if you repeat it over and over and over again, you smear them over and over again, then people will believe it.
No, I know that. Yeah.
And then whenever you point out the sentence and you fact check it, it's never going to have the same impact as all this barrage of smears.
Well, that was before Can I Respond to That, Please started taking the nation by storm, and everything got better. All the wrongs were unwound, as we'll find out later. But the thing that's nice is once you put the lie one place, you can put the lie another place. You can put the lie another place.
Yes.
It's Jay repeating it because it's Jay repeating it clearly because Jay's being quoted in multiple places.
Oh, God. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Really just Jay repeating it. But it's all...
Might as well be. Might as well be Jay repeating it. Yeah, 100%.
So do you have the 40,000 number?
Yes, sir. So this is this paragraph that's highlighted here. The epidemic started in China sometime in November or December. The first confirmed U.S. cases included a person who traveled from Wuhan on January 15th, and it is likely that the virus entered before that. Tens of thousands of people traveled from Wuhan to the U.S. in December. Existing evidence suggests that the virus is highly transmissible and that the number of infections doubles roughly every 3 days. An epidemic seed on January 1st implies that by March 9th, about 6 million people in the U.S. would have been infected. As of March 23rd, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were 499 COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. If our surmise of 6 million cases is accurate, that's a mortality rate of 0.01%, assuming a 2-week lag between infection and death. That is this 1/10 of the flu mortality rate of 0.1%. Such a low death rate would be cause for optimism. Actually, do you want to talk about this one, actually, Bryce? Because it is actually, if anything, this discussion is a little stronger. If people wanted to use this against Jay, it's a little more stronger than the smear. But because here he's clearly building based on some projections of previous data. He's building sort of a model. He's built basically a model, and then he's surmising, as he writes, 0.01%, which is incredibly low. It's far lower than the actual IFR would have actually been. And he's like, such a low case would be cause for, again, using the subjunctive, would be cause for optimism, because he's saying it's hypothetical. The question is writing like this, which is a very scientific way of writing, he's basically building a hypothesis, and he's saying this could be true. Is this appropriate, for the masses? Because then they might read this, it may be, 0.01%. We shouldn't have to worry. Or is this entirely appropriate? In my opinion, is that it's appropriate. People need to understand if this is actually a plausible scenario for the virus. People don't understand that it is plausible that this could be the case. This is definitely on the low end. This was wrong. This hypothesis was wrong. But is it inappropriate to write like this in public? And I don't personally think so, but a lot of people would disagree and think it is, because people maybe not understand. They need to be more afraid. But if he's right, if this is plausible, then they actually need to understand that this is plausible. That would be my take. So then he does this back of the envelope calculation, makes a really easy model that he never published. He's just writing about it in the Wall Street Journal just to speculate. And it's about an order of magnitude lower than the actual true rate. But the same predictions, there are also predictions coming from the World Health Organization at this time, which were orthodoxy, and you had to say this or you'd get canceled. were 3.4%, which were also an order of magnitude higher. So this is an order of magnitude lower. That's an order of magnitude higher. The difference is that the WHO said that's the truth. That is the real risk. And the media would smear anybody who said that it wasn't. Whereas Jay is just clearly being hypothetical. So
also, I guess the other key thing here too, right, is that those deaths, the COVID deaths, might have been underreported on March 23rd, right?
yes. And so,
So
and he's being very clear here. He's saying, as of March 23rd, according to the Centers of Disease Control
nobody
Prevention.
can read the word according. That's such a big word.
Right.
No.
This is a real scientist generating hypothesis. That's what he's doing here.
Yeah, which we can't handle. Because if we can't handle reading the difference between 20,000 and 2 million and only seeing the 20,000 because it's written as a number, not written out as a word, there's no way they're going to understand according.
So Jay is being very careful with this language here because he knows there's uncertainty, and every single sentence here is couched in these scientific qualifications of if, surmise, according to.
Well, that goes to so go ahead and keep reading down. So now you're going to get to the 20 to 40,000 thing, right? Because this one is even, okay.
So it says, which, by the way, as we'll see in a moment, other very prominent scientists, including Fauci and Redfield, were also making estimates that are similar to that. Okay. Nonetheless, it says, this does not make COVID-19 a non-issue. The daily reports from Italy and across the U.S. show real struggles and overwhelmed hospital systems. But a 20,000 to 40,000 death epidemic is a far less severe problem than the one that kills 2 million. Given the enormous consequences of decisions around the COVID-19 response, getting clear data here to guide decisions is critical. We don't know the true infection rate in the U.S. Antibody testing of representative samples to measure the disease prevalence, including the recovered, is crucial. Nearly every day, a new lab gets approval for antibody testing, so population testing using this technology is now feasible. So my take here is he has a lowball estimate. He's couching it in scientific language. He's saying we need more data. It could be as low as this lowball estimate, but he doesn't know, and therefore this is a call for more studies. How is that wrong? How is that wrong? Let's contrast this to what the World Health Organization said. They were saying 3.4%. The media was smearing anybody, including Trump, who got it actually right. He's at a fraction of a percent. They smeared him endlessly, acting like it was a set thing. It wasn't. It was an order of magnitude lower than what he said. Jay, on the other hand, is saying, we don't know what it is. It could be really, really low, but we need more data. How is that? His estimate is a little bit low. Okay, fine. But he's asking important questions. He's challenging narratives. His estimate ended up being a little bit low. He used couch scientific language, and then he called for more data. This is what a scientist does. As you know, Bryce, when you're in the lab, 99% of every one of your ideas doesn't work, right? Nothing works.
Sorry. Nearly 100% of my ideas work. That's like your experience, but I am,
everything works fine.
Almost correct.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'm.
No, that's true. A lot of things just don't work. But here's the really egregious point here. If you want to, do you have the sentence that Zeynep said? Like, let's just go back to that sentence.
Do you have
there? Or
I have it on my screen. Here's what Dr. Bhattacharya got wrong about COVID-19 in the early days of the pandemic. Bhattacharya repeatedly predicted that that the virus would likely kill about 20,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was putting the cart ahead of the horse.
About 20 to 40,000 Americans. Okay. He didn't do that. That's not what this.
Where is this prediction? Because I don't see it.
What do you mean? Like,
he does also have 2 million is written out. It's not like it says 2 million there. Now that, like you said, the number 2 million doesn't appear in Tufekci's article. I'm wondering, is it because it was written out like TWO million rather than the number?
The ChatGPT can't detect the numbers that are written out, I think.
Again, we don't know. We don't know if ChatGPT is to blame for this, but I would say it's possible. We
Look,
can't
look, look,
rule it out. We can't rule it out.
it's a crazy thing that in this sentence he's providing a range, right?
But again, two of the numbers are actually numbers. And my brain, when it sees numbers, like those are numbers. But now we get, and it says 2 million, but it's written out like TWO million, like MILLION. I don't know if that's a number or not. It's possible it's not, right? Because it's not a number. It's
You know what?
Yeah.
Bryce, I think we should be charitable towards Tufekci and maybe concede that 2 million when written out is not a number. So actually she maybe wasn't misrepresenting things. This actually was a prediction of 20 to 40,000. I think that makes complete sense because
So we're just saying that if you write out 2 million, it's not what is it then? What would 2 million be? It's not a what would 2 million be if it's not a number? Why would it be in this sentence? See, that's also a thing. You'd have to consider that maybe Jay doesn't know how to write. If 2 million isn't a number, then why is it in this sentence? Like, it wouldn't make sense. Kills 2 million. Is that like a person? Like, is there like a thing called million and it's going to kill two of them? Right? That would be like a million. He's killing two of them.
right.
So I don't know what million is.
Right. It's either going to kill 20 to 40,000 people or two of these
whatever,
million, two of these million
whatever,
things.
Whatever million is.
I think it's a kind of bird, maybe.
A million bird. It's possible.
It's a bird. It looks like a
Let
bird.
me get out the
like a
chat
French-
and see if a French.
No, it's a French word for some kind of bird that's in France.
Million. It's a
Yeah,
million.
million. That's right. It's a million. And you know,
Hey, you know what? It's just Jay being elite again. The Stanford elitism coming through. He's using French words rather than numbers. And you know what? He deserves being pilloried for this, Frank. If we're going to say, I think you're right, Kevin. I think we solved it. There's no funny business going on.
you know,
It's not a number. When you write it out, it's not a number.
yeah.
It's-
And Tufekci, yeah, she
Yeah.
remembered her French lessons. And then
It
she
must
read that
be.
number and she was like, yeah, like that's not
That's
a number.
not a number. It's not
Right.
a number.
He's making a prediction.
It's probably a French bird. There's 2 million, 2 million. The bird, the million bird, and I'm going to use my AI technology to draw an AI image of the million bird into this video. So we basically have one. There's no prediction. If we look at this, there's no prediction. He's just literally saying the numbers 20,000 and 40,000 are different than the number, if it is a number, 2 million. And even if it's not a number, 20,000 and 40,000 are different than two of the million birds. They're all different. That's all he's
Right.
saying.
Right.
Far
he-
less
he-
your problem.
yeah.
It's not
no,
even
well, yeah. It
Rick
comes
was just
back
saying-
around. Yeah.
2, 4, and whatever 2 million are different. There's no prediction, right? I don't see
That's
a prediction.
exactly right. Even if we read this charitably,
I think we have been.
he's even
I
if
think we
he's to the utmost charitability,
Yeah.
she did not mention in her article that it could have actually been a prediction about killing two of these French birds. And because she leaves that out, in the utmost charitable
correction that
interpretation,
That's neat. That's a correction that needs to be added. I think we need to write a letter to the editor of the New York Times. 2 million. Clearly, what we omitted is that Jay predicted that 2 French birds. Oh. Kevin, are people this stupid? I don't answer that. I think I know the answer. They are, because if this has been the lie that's been repeated and now it's in the New York Times, and I say that with all peace and love, New York Times, the circulation of the New York Times is so much higher than everything else. It is irresponsible to lie, especially about somebody who has already faced years and years of death threats from like this. If we're being totally real here, this is wrong. It's just wrong. And it's why you and I get really angry when Jay gets smeared for stuff like this. There's
Yep.
plenty of things to smear him for.
Yeah,
now.
let's go meta here. Let's go meta here. We can cut this out if you want, but let's go meta here because I think there's a reason this kind of misrepresentation happened that's deeper than simply calling it a lie. I think that simply putting out the number of this lower end of this estimate was unacceptable at the time, and maybe even considered unacceptable now.
You mean back in March? You mean in March 2020, it was a no-go zone to put this number out?
Yes, it means that even if Jay's right at this point, that could be at the lower end of the estimate, it is considered or thought, I believe, that this lower end of this estimate is immoral even to state it, right? Because to state that it's possibly this low could call into question the public health narrative that COVID is really, really terrifying and we need these big policies, et cetera, and it can kill people. This is the simplistic thinking. And so therefore it is justified to kind of slightly distort this sentence to say he said this, because so they're actually truly upset. They're actually truly upset that he said this. And whenever they say he said this, he made that prediction, what they're really saying is he should have never, like, they're genuinely upset and they want to articulate it in some way to make him look really bad, because even though he was doing the right thing as a scientist, he was doing the wrong thing as a person, right? That deserves a punishment. And so it becomes morally justified for them using leftist brain. And I used to have leftist brain. It becomes morally justified, like up till 2 years ago, I did. It becomes morally justified for them to then point out this infraction, this moral violation of even positing this estimate, because it can instill doubt in people about the dangerousness of COVID and cost lives. So I think that's what this is really about. They don't want real science in the public.
But why repeat it now? I mean, it may be along those lines, right? So certainly your idea there would make sense that they do that back then. But why hang your hat on a lie? Whatever the hell this is.
Because it's still
ChatGPT. We blame it on ChatGPT.
It's not a lie to them, I think.
It's not. It's I see. So they created they fabricated a statement that just wasn't true, and it became the truth.
Because the morality is more important than the literal truth, I think.
So
he violated a boundary by saying this.
We really need Zainab to comment on this, and I would hope that she would. And he violated a moral boundary. Zainab may not even know. Zainab may just be repeating things. What I'm saying is this becomes becomes justified to lie about people like this because he violated a moral boundary here. It's not a scientific wrong, but it's like morality replaces science, and so scientific hypotheses that are morally unacceptable are condemned. This is what I think is going on with that. This is why I think that became mimetic, and I think they still hold Jay in contempt for that moral violation, and that's why they're going to continue to repeat it. Or it's already gotten a life. It's already taken on a life of its own. Jay said it could be orders of magnitude lower. It did end up being actually an order of magnitude lower. So his fundamental line of questioning here was correct. On the lower end of his estimates, that was not right, but it was definitely lower than what they were saying. And so he was absolutely correct in the substance while using this provocative language of 20,000 in order to sort of drive home the point of uncertainty. But he was absolutely right to be asking the questions, and it was much lower than it was thought. Interestingly, in February of 2020, I believe this is on the 28th, I believe it was late February 2020, Fauci and Redfield published an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's actually widely cited, but it's not frequently talked about in the media or on social media. They said that
and I'll quote what they wrote. This is Robert Redfield, the CDC director, and Fauci, the NIAID director. They said they made the same argument that Jay did, the identical argument, in fact. If one assumes that the number of asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic cases is several times as high as the number of reported cases, exactly the same argument, the case fatality rate may be considerably less than 1%. This suggests that the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 may ultimately be more akin to those of severe seasonal influenza, which has a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%, or pandemic influenza, which is a little bit higher, rather than a disease similar to SARS or MERS, which have case fatality rates of 9 to 10% and 36% respectively. They are lowballing it here the same way Jay did in the New England Journal of Medicine, in this scientific publication. Jay lowballed it a little bit in
January, right? Or when is this?
This is from late February. This is about 2 weeks before.
Wait, this is only 2 weeks before Jay?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Why would it make such a big difference then? They'd already did the lockdowns, right? Is that the issue?
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating point, Bryce. They had already done the lockdowns in
They
March.
did it at the beginning of March, right?
Middle March, March 14th, 15th.
That's when Jay's thing came out, right?
Jay's thing came out 10 days later.
Yeah.
So, yes, that is brilliant. That's a really good point.
It's not brilliant. Let's just be honest.
Well, it's a really good observation.
Well,
the other explanation is that New England Journal of Medicine is not, it doesn't have as much circulation, but it kind of does actually among clinicians, So,
right. So it's not an op-ed and whatever, he put his
yeah, maybe, but I like yours better actually, because
the timing of everything matters, right? Because this time, during this time, you had the company of origin, you had a lot of moving parts, people changing their positions like one day to the next, but it's weird. It's the reaction to Jay's statement that's the weird thing. Like, why was that a no-fly zone then, but not like 3 weeks earlier?
Yeah, and I think it's because timing is part of it. I think it may be the reason actually. That's because then basically Jay's questioning the policy. Jay's questioning the policy that we need these severe lockdowns. If it is as low as this lowest end estimate, even as low as what Fauci and Redfield are saying, severe seasonal influenza, we don't lock down for severe seasonal influenza ever, right? So but if you're saying it right after we've instituted lockdowns, you're questioning basically the war. You're questioning the war that we're fighting. People are dying in Germany or whatever. You're questioning it and you're undermining the war effort essentially, right? So whenever at this time they were making these hypothetical statements, Fauci and Redfield, they were not doing that. The time that Bhattacharya the decision was made, you can't say these things anymore, which is wrong, because you should be able to question the war. That's why the Sedition Act was thrown out and everybody was an early 20th
Look at
century.
you with the history lesson here. What are we doing? We're going into history.
All this stuff was determined 100 years ago that actually it's wrong to suppress free speech during these emergency situations. No, they tried doing it, and then the courts threw it out. The president threw out the cases. They pardoned everybody because they were like, this was wrong what we did. And we're doing it again, and it's wrong still. So,
is it the case that if we read this New England Journal of Medicine article and apply the same standard as we did to that Anthony Fauci and Robert Redfield are catastrophically wrong?
Yeah, they predicted a 0.1% case fatality rate. Granted, and I think there is some confusion here. I think Redfield and Fauci are misusing a term. I need to reread it. But I think, granted, they did say a case fatality rate of 0.1%. And that's case fatality rate, right? Like severe seasonal influenza, IFR is actually much lower than 0.1%. So it could be on the order of 0.01%, on almost the same thing as Jay said. And yes, they did not.
Doctoring skills there, the little bit of doctoring you have, the little doctoring stuff going on right there, because I don't understand these abbreviations, because I don't have the medical training.
So they are basically saying something incredibly similar to Jay here. And they were never accused they were never accused of getting catastrophically wrong. That's exactly right.
Fauci's like the Pope, though. The Pope is infallible, or we say infallible or whatever. Yeah,
right.
Fauci can never lie. We know that.
He can never be wrong. Yeah,
never wrong.
Never wrong. Never can lie.
Lie because he's never wrong. He's infallible. Pope rules for Fauci. Yeah. You want to read her next statement about what Jay was catastrophically wrong about?
It's hard to be less crazy than what she's already done. More crazy than what she's already done. But this is almost in some ways more crazy.
More incorrect, or whatever we're saying. Whatever we're telling you. By the way, we did blame the potential for her using AI for this, to be fair.
Right.
So it's possible that it's
the AI was wrong. Yeah.
Possible. But
so
we don't know.
She says, quote, he co-wrote an influential study that grossly overestimated how many people had already...
Yeah.
Grossly overestimated.
Not just over it. Gross.
How many people had already been infected and recovered from the disease, implying, incorrectly, that immunity was much more widespread than known, and the disease was much less deadly than many assumed.
Interesting.
It's very interesting because she links here this hit piece from Salon, which had this massive circulation at the time. I remember it.
Does Salon do anything other than hit pieces? It seems like Salon is the place to go.
Salon is the hit piece place. It's really horrible.
It is the place to go for hit pieces.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the reason he's not off his rocker is because the estimated IFR is very close to what we now accept today as the IFR. Assuming, and this is what his sample was in, this sample was in the community. It wasn't in nursing homes. This is a community study, assuming we're talking about the community. So community IFR is going to be close to 0.2 to 0.3%. I think it's probably closer to 0.3. So he got 0.2, it's maybe 0.3. And that's because the difference might be because this is in Santa Clara. And so it's going to be different from other places in the country. And ultimately it might be.
He got 0.2 versus 0.3.
Yeah, I think, I don't know exactly what the community IFR is, but I believe the community IFR is either 0.2 or 0.3 because
Wait.
Go ahead.
It is? Hold on.
No, Santa Clara study is essentially right.
I know, but wait, so it didn't grossly overestimate?
No, it's exactly right. Santa Clara study is exactly right. It's exactly right.
The words grossly overestimate means exactly right, is what you're saying. Is that how I'm supposed to read that?
Right.
Because that's what Zeynep says.
Right. Okay. So Zeynep is running off of 2020 narrative.
Santa Clara is right, yet there's just not an acceptance of that by people who don't want to accept it, or?
Maybe among scientists. I don't know if Zeynep is up to date.
Zeynep is a scientist, correct? Are you saying Zeynep's not a scientist?
Isn't she a sociologist? I'm sorry.
That's a science. Sociology, soc, as I call it, is a science.
Yeah, she's a science journalist who has her mind in 2020. And she doesn't know that they were actually right. They're vindicated. And this study is a good, solid study if it's understood the right way. Now, this is not the total IFR of everybody, including nursing homes. This is only IFR of the community. That was their sample in the community. This is correct. So she just doesn't know that this is right. And she's saying it's incorrect. It's as simple as that. She's saying the exact opposite of the truth. Yeah.
0 for 2. So saying the exact opposite of the truth is often referred to as a lie. But here, it could just be the AI is again, just doing something a little bit wrong.
That is really that is the most charitable interpretation of this article, that it's written by AI.
Again, and we're not sure if the New York Times even requires people to say they're using AI.
I don't believe it's in their official policy. I actually think this is highly plausible. Yep.
No, it would allow us to say that it wasn't like there wasn't some like misfeasance or something. It was just AI. And you can't blame AI. It's not actually a thing that can misfease. You can't misfease. So it would just make a mistake.
Yes.
It's trained. It would be trained on a lot of hit pieces. So if you're using AI that's trained on a bunch of dishonest hit pieces, you'll get a very honest repeat of those hit pieces, but it will be with the highest integrity. So it's possible, right?
I genuinely believe that the explanation for this article is to a substantial degree that the Tufekci AI person was trained on a lot of hit pieces and she just doesn't know. So,
Possibly. Yeah. Well, let's
Yeah.
see. Again, we welcome her to a future episode of Can I Respond to That, Please? To respond to these charitable explanations for what she's 0 for 2. All right. Now, does she actually go 0 for 3? So the next point, number 3, in October 2020. Oh, here we go. It's the gosh darn Great Barrington Declaration.
you don't want to. Do you want to look at Ralphie though?
Wait, is this where you put? Okay. Is
Yeah.
that where Ralphie appears?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Let me share
let's-
again.
Let's. Okay, I'm going to stop this. Here's a creative decision that you made in your tweet thread, Kevin, and I don't know. So all of a sudden, Kevin is a very serious, as I said, one of the smartest people that I've ever met, and yet, as I'm scrolling through this nearly Shakespearean level thread, all of a sudden we get to this. And I don't know what to make of it. So here it is. In a picture, you want to describe what this is?
Yeah, it's Ralph Wiggum from the from The Simpsons. He eats glue and he's and he's smiling very amiably, genially towards the screen, and he's saying, "I'm a journalism," in sort of a Ralph Wiggum voice. One would imagine. And I said, by the way, I found a picture of Zainab in a Google search. This is terrible. Honestly, we shouldn't show this.
No, we're showing, because the thing is, we're all human. We're all human. Now, I gotta say, it is funny, and I think I told you before, if Zainab is watching this, and I'm sure she's not, but if she is, it is kind of funny, frankly. Is it nice? No. Is it funny? Yes. Because first of all, Ralph Wiggum is a very lovable character. The phrase "I'm a journalism" is also funny. Whether it's appropriate to say this is what you get in a Google search for her, probably not fair at all. But it's possible you were using AI. And if you were using AI, it's possible the AI made the mistake, not you.
That's right. I was
True.
using AI. That's right.
If you weren't probably using AI.
For
I
this
think you-
one tweet, I was
I think
actually.
you were being malicious to be, it's just a little bit of maliciousness, but
I
no
mean,
one's
come
going
on. Come on.
Persist-
Has not this entire article basically been Ralph Wiggum writing in the New York Times? Has it not?
It's
like-
that's a generous interpretation. Because he wouldn't be expected to have any grounding in the truth. But yeah, it's wonderful. This thread really is it's like a nice little break in to see this Ralph Wiggum post.
Yeah.
I'm a journalism.
Yeah. And I really was restrained through most of this post in my
You were. That was
language.
that was a
That
little
was
bit
an
of a
outburst.
little
That was an
outburst.
outburst.
Okay,
I
so
had-
we're gonna go into the Great Barrington Declaration statement she made. We're doing next. You made to read
Zainab-
it?
Yeah, okay. She says, in October of 2020, he wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, which calls for focused protection measures only for older people and the vulnerable, while the virus swept through the rest of the then unvaccinated population to supposedly grant herd immunity. But protecting older people alone, while everyone else, including their caregivers, got infected, was never going to be feasible. Additionally, those who are not older or obviously vulnerable could still be harmed from infections. And this is just, this quote is just,
A lot wrong with this, we're gonna say, right? There's a lot to unpack, as we say in the business, in the podcasting business.
I mean, I just want to say that, it's like somebody got the basic idea of the Great Barrington Declarations and then just assumed that the people who wrote it were idiots, and then be like, oh, but what about this? What about this? Without knowing anything about what it actually said, or what an intelligent person would how they would respond. It's like, this is an incredibly uncharitable view of the Great Barrington Declaration that kind of views Jay and Martin and Sunetra as idiots. Like, if it's that easy to debunk the Great Barrington Declaration, then like genuinely Jay and then they're idiots. And then all the thousands of people who wrote the GBD are idiots. It's like it's such an obvious thought that you'd have. It's like somebody who just learned about the Great Barrington Declaration. They're asking their first question, but what about this? And then she's acting like that's the refutation. But it's nonsense. It's like, it's not like Jay and it's not like they said that.
So let's just be fair here. You're basically saying this is a very lazy, intellectually lazy interpretation of that document, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's shamefully lazy. It's like anybody with self-awareness and sort of like some sense of shame would have.
Well, is AI self-aware? We need to go back to that, because if we're assuming this is an AI-generated op-ed, then self-awareness would not be expected.
Right.
Touche. So yeah, this, I agree with you that this is a terribly, what did you call it? Aggressively misleading, or what was it you said? I think you used a bad word, or
I've used all sorts of bad words over the last several minutes for sure.
Is it shamefully dishonest, or it's just not.
It's just bad.
Just bad. It's just bad.
It's bad.
It's not even worth beneath her.
But let's it's yes, okay. Let's not just name call, right? Let's talk about, because we're emoting, but like let's talk about what this actually is actually saying. But protecting older people alone while everyone else, including their caregivers, got infected was never going to be feasible. Well, it's not like anywhere like any of them said, oh yeah, their caregivers can go out and about and get infected while we're doing focus protection for everybody else. Like, that obviously isn't what focus protection is. Obviously, the caregivers would be under the umbrella of focus protection, just like the people they're caring for. And that's how you deal with it, which makes sense, because then even though the caregivers are not at high risk, they're still such a small subset of the population that everybody else can go and not be subjected to these basically focused lockdowns, essentially. And you get rid of a lot of the harm, while, nonetheless subjecting the caregivers to these lockdowns as part of their jobs. And they're so it's just like it's not a hard thing to even think about, like, how that doesn't make sense.
You could have asked, is what, you could have just, so basically, right, you're just, as you pointed out, this is making the assumption that the Great Barrington Declaration authors are idiots.
Yeah.
Is it that it really thought about this scenario where there's...
Yeah, it's an offensive criticism. It's basically an insulting, basically, the underlying assumption here is that Jay is stupid. Like, she's basically calling Jay stupid with this paragraph.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean,
might as well. It should have just said that. That would have been a little more honest.
Yeah, the Great Barrington, in 2000, the Great Barrington Declaration is stupid. Yes, and written by stupid people. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It really is the case. Like, so without defining what focus protection is, you could, of course, say it's anything. Like, why? Right. So you could say, obviously, how are caregivers who are legally bound to lick the handrails of a subway station before they go to work going to be able to carry out this focus protection? We're just making up.
Yes.
Which I guess is par for the course at the New York Times, is what my understanding.
It seems to be, right?
So these three things, so we're 0 for 3. Is there anything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't even cover this, but we could just very briefly say, she has some other sense. Additionally, those who are not older or obviously vulnerable could still be harmed from infections. Well, yeah, if you're at elevated risk, you'd still be under the umbrella of focus protection. Like.
Yeah, you would think. They did say, right. It doesn't seem like, this doesn't actually seem to be worthy of this is, go back. Can you go back to the previous? Wait, let me go back to the Ralph Wiggum. I think your thread
should have it there.
Long. The Ralph Wiggum should come after this Great Barrington Declaration thing.
Fair enough.
because
Fair
it's really this is really the Ralph Wiggum wrote this
Yeah.
thing.
That's
It's really bad. It's really bad.
But I had to have the outburst before then. I was already losing it by that
I mean,
time.
it really breaks up the flow of that tweet thread in a fantastic way. It's very rude and wrong, and I do not approve. I do not condone your Ralph Wiggum and Wiggum image of. Okay, so 0 for 3 did she get the fourth one right? What he was talking about?
So then I basically go in and talk about how some countries did actually implement focus protection, including Sweden, right? And Sweden did.
Hold on. Does it even matter? Does this even matter? No one's gonna care. No one cares if he's right or wrong. They just want to say she just misrepresented what Great Barrington Declaration said, right?
Yeah.
If it worked or not, because it wasn't implemented. Was it implemented anywhere?
Sweden.
Well, but I mean, like Jay's
cheap.
policy was implemented, right?
Well, focus protection was implemented in Sweden. Furthermore,
we all know it worked, right?
Yeah. Yes, and the standard pandemic toolkit. I remember reading a paper from Australia, from the 2000s, who had focus protection as part of the standard pandemic toolkit in Australia. Like this is a policy that's been talked about long before COVID, and it's like now that COVID is the case, then they're pretending this policy that's been talked about for a long time as part of the toolkit is now ridiculous and stupid because lockdowns are in place and lockdowns are the only thing you can do.
You see what we're doing here, Kevin? We're moving the Overton window here because again, when we talk about this, all we just say is that we just go, Sweden was a smashing success. You just casually state the conclusion and make it so that it's clear that you don't need to argue about stuff, right? So you don't even need to argue that it worked or not. You just say it did. That's the way you win the propaganda game. You're like, we know that lockdowns don't work. That's it. That's all you have to say. Like they'll say, "What's the evidence?" Like, and then you just laugh at them. They're like, you're a moron. Are you
we call them science deniers. So Zainab is a science denier.
Why are you a conspiracy theorist? Why are you a mass murderer?
I might start doing that.
That's what you do. That's how you win the arguments. You just dismiss people when they disagree with you and say they're stupid and they're. That's all that's being done here. Grossly, you're grossly something. You say you're grossly, you're catastrophically, you just get your adjectives ready.
Yeah,
but don't use arguments. So Sweden, I think it was fine, right? Did everybody die in Sweden? I think everyone died. Sweden doesn't exist anymore because they were all wiped out from COVID. Is that true?
Yeah, and the caregivers got COVID and showed that focus protection doesn't work and it killed everybody. Yeah.
Sweden no longer exists because
it literally sank into the ocean. Actually, I think COVID sank into the ocean.
The weight of the dead bodies is piling up. So we've learned that it catastrophically, if you don't, which one is it again? Which one are we claiming? It doesn't even matter. What's number 4 from Zainab on how Jay is just horrible?
No, Sweden had the lowest, one of the lowest cumulative excess deaths in the world.
Can read that. Hold on a second. Who can look at that graph can we make the graphs a little bit easier?
Yeah.
What the hell's going on with that graph? Okay? What am I supposed to look at? I'm getting a headache. So you're posting that on Twitter and expecting people to understand what the hell is being shown. All right. Cumulative excess deaths in Sweden. And what is an OECD country?
I don't even know what OECD means. I think it has something to do with oil or something. I don't know, bro. Like, it's OECD. This is a really good question. I've never known what it is. I just know it's like a developed country. It's not necessarily European, right? There's like,
right.
It's called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Now I know that.
Oh, I see. So it's rich countries.
Rich countries. That's right.
Right.
It's rich countries.
So when I see a blue line, it says Sweden and it's on the bottom. That probably means Sweden. So is this like golf and low is good or golf?
Yeah.
Is it like
low is good?
Sports. Okay. So Sweden did better
in the long run.
Yes.
In the long run. And the argument is, I mean, there's many reasons why. It's very confounded. But the argument is that
Chocolate? Is it the chocolate of the Swedes? Is it the clock making
no,
efforts?
it's the.
That's what. I'm sorry.
Have you do you know Harkerl, the fermented shark? Do they eat fermented shark in Sweden? Have you heard of that?
No, that's the reason. So it's not the Great Barrington Declaration.
Yeah,
thing.
it's fermented shark, probably.
Fermented shark is the key. So no one's looked at that.
Surprisingly, nobody's written a paper about that. That's actually shocking. This is scientific malpractice.
What? I bet Zainab might get an idea for the next op-ed to propose that it probably was fermented shark and not focus protection. We need to do the experiment. We need to do it in a culture that doesn't consume fermented shark to see if we get the same results. So when
Aren't you a microbiologist, Bryce? You can team up with Tufekci, right?
well, we need to get Daszak and friends to unleash another pandemic so we can do experiments on the population of the globe. Sorry, we're gonna have to cut this. You're gonna get canceled. They're gonna cut this. They're gonna be like, these guys, they're the worst. They are such. And I'm still trying to figure out who makes graphs like this. Like, what are the other little lines? How come those countries? What's the one that just stops right in the middle? Did the country October or at the top? Like, did many people die? They're just like, look at it. What
That
is
might
that?
be that might be like Bulgaria or something. Yeah.
They just all died. That country is another country. They couldn't count. There's nobody left to count the excess in October of 2021. How sad. Okay, sorry. So Sweden smashing success. It proves Jay's right. That's the new narrative. We're gonna history will show that Jay was right. But then what's the fourth one?
In early 2021, with no evidence, Bhattacharya declared that the majority of Indians have natural immunity to COVID-19, claimed vaccinating the whole population can cause great harm, and predicted his preferred approach would reduce death rates from COVID infection to nearly zero. Which makes him sound completely crazy. That's a crazy thing. If you just don't know anything, you read that.
But like, let's say what you believe. So if you're reading this, just naive readers saying that he's claiming vaccinating the population would cause incredible harm, would kill people, essentially.
Exactly.
And that predicted his preferred approach, which we don't even know what she's. What does that even mean?
And that's right. You're absolutely right. I was getting tired at the end of this thread. I didn't pull
What does that even mean? What is his preferred approach?
Maybe herbs. Maybe herbs. Give people herbs, Indian herbs. Yeah.
Or the million. We could bring back the million. Feed the masses of India the million and see what happens. So incredibly, his preferred approach, whose preferred approach wouldn't reduce death rate? I think my preferred approach would be the one that reduced death rates to zero, but we don't even know what the hell she's talking about. In addition to being irresponsible, it's also just it's inscrutable, right? It's like I can't even understand. And predicted his preferred approach, which she doesn't say what it is, would reduce death rates from COVID infection to nearly zero. This is insane. This sentence is just stating random from the article, patching it together, making it seem like he's an anti-vaxxer, making it seem like he's insane, and then attributing mass casualties to him. Because then it goes, short afterward, in the wake of this article, India suffered a deadly wave that killed millions of people. What the hell? In just a few months, among the highest, fastest death rates of any country. What does it have to do with his op-ed? The op-ed caused a massive wave of death? Is that the implication? We're just putting together things. Soon afterward, a massive catastrophe occurred. Like, why are Jay's op-eds always causing so much harm?
So here's another thing, Bryce. I actually looked at the highest, fastest death rates of any country, and that goes to a link that just talks about India having like a certain death rate, like a certain high, or not death rate, a high death count, right? The link that goes to doesn't talk about the highest or fastest death rates. right? It doesn't talk about the rate of death at all during this deadly wave. So she literally made it up.
Oh, really? I'm
Yes.
shocked.
She made it up. So
Or
yes,
to be fair,
yes,
the AI. The
Yes.
AI often gets links wrong.
So at this point of this thread, I was exhausted, so I didn't even get into this, and I had to get to work. So I didn't even get into it. But yeah, this is. I mean, looking at this now, this is even more crazy than I remember.
It's actually the strange thing here is every single one of these things is just horrifically, like, it's just horrific. 0 for 4, but in a horrific way that is really kind of disqualifying. Like this, I'm going to go on record here. I mean, again, I started this by saying I was very appreciative of her before. She cannot write another op-ed for the New York Times with this.
If you want, Bryce, I'm down for helping out with any kind of campaign or letter or anything you want to put together. We could do an open letter.
We could just do a letter editor and say either Zeynep is using AI and that AI needs to be trained better on a later, trained on hit pieces. It actually, the most generous, it really is a case that an AI trained on the hit pieces would give you this. But any like credible writer with any ounce of, curiosity maybe, or like, why would you do this? Why would you even do this? Do you know, Kevin? Like what would go through your mind to make you do this? Like this, I mean, like 0 for 4, like with four statements that are just wrong. So she ends the article by saying this, but Bhattacharya also has some valid points. He's criticized those who would silence critics of the public health establishment on a variety of topics, like the plausibility of a coronavirus lab leak. Hold on. Okay. Literally, the thing that she commends him on is the thing that she has taken the stand against, right? Like, so she's particularly interested in that lab leak piece. So that's the thing that she connects with to say, well, it's good that he's saying, don't silence people that are talking about lab leak. Because we all know Zeynep's on that beat as well. So that's actually, this is even worse than I thought. Okay, so what else and whether infections induced immunity. Okay. I mean, is that she must have taken, I'm going to assume that she took the position that infections do. Whatever. Okay. I'm wild guess. I mean, it's a 50% chance, but okay. Public health authorities dismissed him. But you know what? You know who else is dismissing him? Zeynep in 2024. Public health officials and Zeynep Tufekci in her...
No, read this sentence. It's rich. This is a great sentence. Read the sentence.
Oh, dismissed him and his allies as fringe and did not sufficiently address their views and assertions, many of which were demonstrative. Oh, please. I'm sorry.
So the real problem with the censorship is that it deprived them of the opportunity of showing just how wrong Jay was. That's
right. So let me just read this properly. I keep stopping because I keep getting stuck on everywhere. All right. Here's her reason why the censorship was bad. Public health authorities dismissed him and his allies as fringe and did not sufficiently address their views and assertions, many of which were demonstrably wrong. Not just wrong, but demonstrably wrong. However, as Kevin and I have noted, each of her 4 points that he's wrong on were demonstrably wrong themselves. The Zeynep has been demonstrably wrong on her wrongs, and now is claiming that the censorship was bad because it wouldn't allow people to show how demonstrably wrong they were. It's bad, Kevin. This is pretty bad. So, and then, okay, he also correctly wanted the societal costs of pandemic measures to be considered more strongly. Oh, and that's because Francis Collins also wanted that too. I see. So the lockdowns caused harms, and wonderful for Zaynab to acknowledge that was nice of him, because Collins also thought that. If his many incorrect predictions had been correct, what? Okay, what I mean, what he's talking about. Even the early pandemic isolation measures might have been excessive, but at the time, Bhattacharya was making these predictions. Again, we talked about what was and wasn't a prediction.
At the time Bhattacharya was making these predictions, it made sense to be cautious because we knew so little about COVID. Well, actually, it makes sense to be cautious about the interventions because we know so little about COVID too, right? Like that argument cuts both ways. And in fact, that was Jay's point. Like, she thinks that the default frame is that the virus is worse than anything else, but it's not. The interventions themselves, you should be cautious about. And she doesn't understand that.
But let's read the final paragraph, and then we're gonna, because this is ridiculous. Like, last paragraph of this thing is, if he is confirmed by the Senate, the course of Bhattacharya's tenure will depend on whether he can concede what he got so wrong, while remembering that now he will be the one who needs to keep an open mind and listen to his critics, even when what they're saying is uncomfortable. That is absurd. That is just offensive as usual for the whole. I mean, so of course Jay keeps an open mind and listens. The one who is not listening here is Zaynab, and we saw with her 0 for 4 at the beginning. But the bigger point, I think, is that this is supposed to be an assessment of how he would be as an NIH director, and all it was her, for whatever reason, it's just a hit piece on Jay, and it's done in a way that she's not acknowledging that she might have been wrong, especially because she's claiming Jay's wrong about that he's not wrong about, or it's just he didn't say. I don't understand. Like, it's just irresponsible. It's reckless. I guess it's projection maybe or something. I don't know. Like, how do you possibly be so bold to say, hopefully he can learn when he's wrong and learn to admit that he's wrong, while simultaneously misrepresenting a ton of shit? Maybe Zaynab, maybe we should write an article where we ask her to reflect on what was wrong in her op-ed or something. I don't know. What is the take-home message for people that are watching this at home and wondering, how can one op-ed be so terrible?
I mean, be very careful about what you read. And the media, as Elon has been tweeting a lot lately, and I agree with him 100%, the media lies, and you can't really trust it. But, you know, I know I'm supposed to come away with something serious here, but like, X is the media now. We are the media now. And honestly, New York Times, to be serious, you can't really trust a lot that's going on here. Even the articles that weren't so egregious like this, there was another one by, like, I can't remember her name. There was this another article that came out around the same time as this one from the New York Times. It was a lot more professional, but it was so stilted. It quoted like really dumb people who don't know what they're talking about. And
I think I was quoted in that article, but that's fine. Cool. No, don't worry about it. I didn't take it the wrong way. No, just kidding.
No. So that article, it still was just completely misrepresented things, and it wasn't false about anything, but it was just like it cherry picked things and opinions to make Jay look more controversial than he really is, if you really know the science. So, yeah, I think you can't really trust the media. That's like the first thing I'll say, and but what should we do about it? Whatever you want to do, Bryce, I'm on board. I'm on board to put in some work to do it. Yeah.
But this is one of those cases where I think she just gets an F. I'm just going to give her an F on this. Like, maybe she should get a mulligan. Like, she could. I think actually the New York Times should retract this with the promise that they'll put in a new opinion piece that she actually tries on. Because this is just late. This is just really bad. This is really bad writing.
Does New York Times ever retract things like this?
No, I'm just saying they could make. I don't think so. I mean, there's no reason to retract it. It's an opinion. It's just a real crap opinion. I think it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I just think it's embarrassing, and she should be, I've said this before, ashamed, right?
Yeah.
I would be ashamed. I don't know if we've exposed her per se, but I think what we have done is spent a lot of time talking about a really op-ed. And that's why, that's what we do here on Can I Respond to That, Please? So I guess, Kevin, I appreciate you for staying up super late and delaying whatever you're going to do for the remainder of the evening so that you could speak with me tonight. And so I guess until next time, this is Bryce Nichols speaking with Kevin Bass on Science from the Fringes. Can I respond to that, please? Take care.
Thanks, Bryce.